I'm very honored and very happy to be here, but mostly happy because I see so many friendly faces, and because the 3 days that I've spent in Mumbai have been absolutely splendid and fantastic, and to many of you who are sitting here, have shown me a wonderful time, and also our discussions here at SIS have been extremely rewarding and very promising for our collaboration. What I'm going to talk about is truly a little bit more mechanistic, because it's about how you plan education. I think that your introduction was really on to the point, because education and learning and being with other people, you learn all the time. So what is education, and how can you deal with it in a society where you want to document many things, and where new public management might, I have the feeling that in the Bologna process in Europe is very, very strongly going in that direction. And we want some things that maybe we work against by wanting them that way. That's very much the point that I want to make today. I will try to go through my presentation, discussing these elements that I've shown also in the abstract: employability, the future job market that we do not know, and that promises to have very few jobs, a world that promises to have an extreme complexity of problems that we should deal with. That's the most important thing, probably, is to empower students to deal with them in an independent way, together. And that student-centered learning has become now also, in new public management, the way to go. And in that way, discuss what kind of work forms, what kind of exam forms, what kind of competences should we develop, and how develop them. And here we can definitely learn from each other. But I will try to talk about some of the tools and discuss how is it that we go about them, and hope for a very good discussion afterwards. You're also welcome to ask questions while I present. Of course, the project work is very important, because it seems to be a place where we meet, working with projects, with problems that we formulate together, where students and researchers and communities work together. This is very much what we do at Roskilde also, and where you have found so much engagement. And then pedagogical innovation. Yes, what is that? Many things are being reinvented. What is actually new? And is innovation really the thing we have to go about to do things in new ways, or is it the personal innovation, creativity, etc.? Will future education go more towards specialized education, or more towards generic skills? And then the challenge of quality assurance and the formal documentation of relevance in higher education. Is that an impediment or an empowerment? Because our ministers, our governments want us to do relevant education, and they have started talking about employability for the last past years. So these are the key words. But first of all, I'd like to just say what are the goals of education. And I think that it's interesting to see that the UNESCO has formulated interesting goals of education for the 21st century. For the person who is being educated, for the individual, learning to know, that's knowledge. And that has always been part of education, that you transfer some knowledge, you find some knowledge, you acquire knowledge. But you also have to do something with the knowledge that you acquire. It means that you have to have competences to actually act, and to be able to judge what to do with your knowledge. Knowledge is not so much, it's interesting, but it is not so much if you do not know what to do with it, if you're not ready to handle it, to do some action. And then you also, in education, a very important part is to be educated. It's part of being educated that you can live with other people, learning to live together with, to know, to do, and to live together with, to be able to understand the context of your knowledge and your actions. And that is a very important part of being also an intellectual or an academic, that you are able to understand the context and to reflect in an organized way with other people and find out what is it that I should do here and how will these people react and how do they understand it. And then learning to be yourself. Learning to be a person who is developing, who is learning, and who is becoming a strong human being who can work with others, use your learning, and do all the other things. These 4 parts of learning are extremely simple and I believe very true in all education. You cannot just focus on one of them. Of course, there will be some programs. If you want to be a psychologist, you might focus very much on the last one. And there might be others. An engineer has to know a lot, but also has to learn to do a lot. And of course, you could pick different kinds of education and focus more on one than on the other. But those are 4 pillars of education. To the politicians and to the society, we also need to educate for 2 other big goals. One is to create candidates for the job market, for the jobs we already have. There is a need of psychologists or engineers or teachers. So we have to educate in order to fill up those gaps, those places where there are already jobs. And then we very much have to educate to prepare change and to be ready to go forward and solve problems and make change. So education is very much also a part of our capacity in our society to be able to cope with the challenges and to deal with change and to think about and reflect together upon the changes we want and the changes we may not want. So that's true. That's for the society. These are more for the individual. And then comes in the notion of employability. That comes, of course, from government and state. And of course, if I take an education, I also want a job at some point. You do it, I guess, both in order to develop as a person and in order to also get an occupation and to make a change, or to get a job, or to earn money. These things might be different priorities for everybody. But it's interesting, and I always like this quotation, this quote, because it's really, we always seem to have a double bind, or the double tendency, because the quote says, when we were not trying to make our graduates more employable, they were more employable. But now that we're trying to make them more employable, they're not. So again, sometimes all the things we do, they're like, as we say in Danish, shooting ourselves in the foot. Even though we think that we're doing our best for exactly that, we may lose what we have. But if we don't reflect and change what we have, it might also be going back. So we really have a challenge in education. We do not know what we are educating for, and it's very difficult when the politicians ask us to declare relevance in advance. What are the competences that we usually talk about? First of all, competences is a word that is largely discussed by learned people. And I'm not going to go into all the different theories about competences. Just say that in the European work, in the Bologna work, we have to declare all exams, and all candidates have to declare all exams, knowledge, skills, and competences. Knowledge, that you know all that's the curriculum, you might say. The skills, that's what you can do with it, do analysis, etc. And the competences is more like transferable skills, more like personal and social competences, more what you as a person are able to do. So competences are really what employers want. They also want knowledge and skills, but they want personal strength. They want people who are able to act independently, work together with people, and do some of the things that I've written up at the last part. But first, those are the 3 words we usually use, and I will talk mainly about competences because knowledge and skills belong more to the specific program, whereas competences are more general to all of us. We all need to discuss competences, and this is where we meet the employers also, where we meet society. And it will be very much in academic education, critical analysis skills, using theories, being aware of the methods that you're using, not just solving the problem, but knowing why, to reflect on the way you solve the problem, be able to use it in new situations, reflect with others, discuss terminology, understand what you're doing, and get wiser by doing it. And I'm sure you get wiser also without reflecting. There are lots and lots of wise people who do not have an education. But here we have to have a reflection that is more theoretical with a terminology that is really recognized, and where we can go back. That's also what research-based means. We can go back in our argumentation, in our analysis, and it can be done again. We can believe in it. We're seeking for truth. And again, you can seek for truth in many ways, but that is the academic idea. And then the competences that almost everybody agrees on, I guess, in most places. I'm not sure I took everything. I just wanted to place some competences before talking about how you acquire them and how everybody acquires them. Because students are different, and some will acquire everything without us doing anything. And some will have a hard time. We are all different. So how do we as educators guarantee and document and control that we actually develop those competencies? But first of all, competencies might be communication. It's extremely important today to be able to communicate, to write well, and to talk well, to present your things in a good manner. Collaboration, always. How do you learn to collaborate? Especially if it's very much in a competitive system. How can you learn to collaborate? It might be better to keep the results to you. Even as a researcher, I believe so much in collaboration. I believe we get so much stronger with collaboration. But there might be incentives that make me think that I should keep my good results to myself because I get a better credential list or whatever, or pay or whatever it gives. Planning and organizing, very important. Comes from project work, I would say, but to believe that the person you employ in your industry, in your business, in your group, is a person who is able to plan and organize in an independent way. You take over and can take responsibility. That would be what we sometimes call accountability. Somebody who takes ownership in what is going on and responsibility for what is going on, and who knows, who is responsible, who understands the system. Creativity. Sometimes we talk about innovation, but creativity is a profound thing for people to be able to think in new ways, it's the innovative thinking, but it's also just solving normal, everyday problems that where you might be creative. And then a commitment to keep learning. Lifelong learning is a very modern thing also. And finally, and I'm not going to go into that today because that's quite another thing that we are faced with today. How can we be technological aware enough, everybody, all of us, in order to deal with technology, to develop technology, to understand, and to sometimes stop technology. We will probably, because we take so much in, we will probably be better at finding out where it really works and where it's better to have people. But that will not be part of my discussion today. It might be later on today. It's not that I don't want to talk about it, but it's not part of the presentation. So student-centered learning, if we go into what that is, empowering students, saying that this, all the competencies I've been talking about are really very much about empowering students. That would be talking about student-centered learning. And also, again, in the UNESCO Action Plan, there is a definition of what it is, student-centered learning. It says, and I think it's very true, and that's again, it's more a culture than something you can technically just do. You have to also have it as an understanding. So they say also that it's a mindset. It's a mindset and a culture that you may have inside a higher education institution, that you respect your students. I believe that both our institutions have that spirit. A learning approach related to constructivist learning theory. It means that we believe that students build up their own knowledge and skills, and that if they just take over without reflecting, they will not acquire it. That you have to, it's really the whole constructivist understanding of learning. It's not giving learning like that, it's building it up for each student to do. Then it's characterized by innovative methods. It means that you learn in communication with teachers and others, very much with students, with other students. It means that students are active participants in their own learning, and it has very much in it that you acquire some skills or for some competences like problem solving, critical thinking, and reflective learning, because you are the subject of your own education. I often meet students who think they are the object, the patient of their education. That means that you are very afraid of the exam and you think you should repeat what you have heard and not reflect and not learn from the inside. But student-centered learning means that students are the subject. Sorry, I'm a linguist. You know about subjects and objects. It's talking about language, but language is the way we perceive the world, and it's very. You could make a linguistic analysis about that, where you place students in your discourses, and where you place yourself in your understanding of learning. And here it is really placing yourself in the center and taking responsibility and collaborating with teachers, professors, but understanding that you are the responsible person and you are the person who is learning and you are the subject of this and not the patient, not the object. So that's empowering students also to discuss with teachers, to ask good questions, because you're curious and you are trying to find your own way and not just find the way, the general way. It might not be interesting. Students are involved also in organizing teaching in the best of all worlds, in the best of all student-centered worlds. There's group work, project-oriented learning, respectful and equal relation between teacher and students, focus on distinct learning needs. What do I need now? Not just what do they all need now we just do the same, but where am I now? What should I study? Where is my point of departure? Understand your own needs. It goes for all of us when we want to move along for the rest of our lives. What is it? What is my next possibility? And where is my driver? Where can I really learn and make a difference? So interest, aspirations, cultural backgrounds, understanding that, and also for the others, also when you work in groups. It means sometimes you talk about in pedagogy differentiated learning. That's for the teacher, of course, to understand, for the professor to understand that students have different needs. It's a big problem for teachers if they have 200 students in a conference hall all the time. That's why we like to work in projects. And maybe you cannot see the teacher all the time if you work in a project. Less because the teacher has to take care of more groups and discuss more specific problems than if you can give a lecture. And sometimes when we are forced to have more students, like we were until 3 years ago in Denmark, we would have feel an obligation to have more conferences and just talk to the students. And that goes away from the constructivist understanding of learning and just passing learning away and having more students. But differentiation comes with project work. And if it doesn't, then the teacher has to, during the conference, address different needs, and that can be different and also boring. Diversity makes us learn more. If we find things that are not what we expect, then we have to find out how to make it click, how to the things we believed were true were not true, and it makes us reflect and it makes us more analytical. And then I would say that motivation is the whole driver. I find a lot of motivation here. I can say that if it's difficult to get to have a place to get accepted in an educational program, if it's really difficult to get in, that motivates a lot. If it's more easy to get in the way it is in Denmark, then motivation becomes a big problem. And we discuss motivation a lot. So maybe I talk too much about motivation for you, but it won't take very long. But student at the center means motivation and engagement and should give quality in education. If you have a motivation crisis, then you have a problem. And I'm not sure that you do, and I think that we at Roskilde have very engaged students also, but we also have students who are not engaged. Maybe because they don't work with the right problems. That's another thing, and that's the curriculum again. That's the other thing to deal with, but I will be a little more technical. Motivation can come from two sides in the theory of motivation, in the very easy theory on motivation. Sometimes in old school systems, it would be very much praise and reward, and you would be threatened with punishment if you didn't learn. It would be very much on the performance, and it would be the other objectives that we had written down, and then you should do that. It would be very predictable, and it would so often be rote learning. I'm not saying that this is bad. I'm just saying that is, if you go to the extreme, it is an old-fashioned way of learning. But we also need that to be part of our learning, of course. The intrinsic, from inside motivation, engagement, is very much with learning from curiosity. I think that's a researcher. I think that children are born researchers. They want to discover. And sometimes we make them into pupils. You're not supposed to go that way. You're not supposed to discover. You're supposed to listen to me now. And you have to repeat afterwards. I'll have an exam, and then you repeat. So there of course, it is not black and white. It's things that could be combined. You have to understand. The curiosity could drive us to be on autonomous learners, and self-efficacy could be there. And the funny thing is that if you're raised to believe that you can do things, then you are much better at having failures and making mistakes and getting up again and trying again. Try again. That's almost an American saying, but it is important for us as human beings to believe so much in ourselves that we can try again. And that is very important in learning, because all are not genius, and some have to try many times, and we as teachers should make them try again. Recognition of trying, recognition of your results, and research learning again, because I think research learning is simply being curious and using the right methods. I won't go into the others, that's more, will take too much time. I really want also to have the discussion. And then you could say that there could be, in accordance with this, 3 approaches to study. And this is taken from an English group from the Sheffield University. I just like the way they present it. The surface learning, the strategic learning, and the deep learning. I hope so much to be in the deep learning, that you do it because you're interested, and then you don't forget. You learn because it's interesting, because you're in a project, in an engaged process, and you make meaning, you connect, you look at hope. If you read a text,